Welcome back. Today we're going to look at how to fill arrays from data files and primarily how to use the ifstream and ofstream classes to do that. So in many programs, we need to store information from one run to the next. And if you don't use files to do that or a database, then what happens is that as soon as you stop the program, you lose the information that's in your variables. So to store it, we store it in files. And that means that we have to be able to read a file and put the information in the file into a data structure, and then also take information and put it into the file. So to do that, we're going to use file input and output. And that means using the ifstream and the ofstream classes. And the neat thing about using these classes is that everything you know about writing to the screen using cout and reading from the keyboard using cin will apply to these ifstream and ofstream classes, because cout and cin are also stream objects. So let's say that we have a file called phonebills.txt, which has information we want to read into a file. And realize that a file basically just stores text. So these aren't stored as numbers, they're stored as characters. And we want to read these into maybe some variables. So we have an array of floats to store the numbers here. And then we have we want to take the text up here, these three elements, and store them into some string variables. And then we'll have some functions that will take this array and convert it to maybe a sum, an average, and a max. It will go through and loop through these variables and add them together. The average will just be the total divided by the number of bills, which will be divided by 12. And then the max will, as it's going through, it'll look to see which one is the largest value. And then what we would like to do is then take this information and write that to a file. So how do we do the read and write part of this? Well, what we often do is, one, we need to know where the files are stored. And a convenient way of doing this is just using a define statement to create some identifiers to represent the name of the file that we want to read. And this file must be in the same directory as our program that's executing. Otherwise, you have to put the directory structure, the path, in here as well. And then our output one will be just phonebillsummary.txt. And then we would have these functions: read bill, write summary file, and then a function that would read we'd pass in the array, and it would return the sum, and then maybe return a float as the average, and then another one that would find max. You pass in the array, and it would return the maximum value in that list. So for the read bill data function, inside of that function, what you would have is something maybe like this, where you would declare a bill input as an ifstream object. And this is going to represent the file that you're going to open. And the first statement after you create your ifstream object should be to call the open function from the ifstream class and pass in the name of our file. Recall that we named it, we defined file in as this string. So really we're passing that string. And you could pass that string in directly, but it's often good to use an identifier like this. Then next what we want to do is you want to check to see if that file is open. And we can do that by just looking at bill input. If bill input returns true, then that means the file is open. If it returns false, it means it's not open. So by looking at using the exclamation point to represent not, if this basically says if not bill input is open, then that means that we didn't successfully open a file. And in our read bill data function, what we would do at that point is display an error message and then return false to say that we couldn't open the file. Now the next step is to read maybe the first three lines and then to use a loop to read the rest of the variables. So let's look at reading the first 3 lines. So these first 3, right now when you open the file, there's a file pointer that's sitting here at the first character of this line ready to read information in, just like it's reading it from your keyboard. And you can use the same commands you used, to get input. And so in this case, we're going to use getLine to get a whole line of data. So getLine basically reads all the way to the next carriage return, and at the end of each of these lines, there's a carriage return. So getLine will read C++ phone company into this variable R company. And then customer Bjarne Strustrup will be read into our customer, and then Jan to December 2007 would be read into years. So by using, just like you can read a file the same way you read the keyboard using getLine. Similarly, now we're sitting here with the file pointer in front of 45.14, and we want to read the rest of those numbers in. So the next step, we could create a loop, and we could using just the same format as you would use for cout. Often, you're used to seeing couts here. Or, I'm sorry, cin. Well, rather than cin, which would read it from the keyboard, if we put in our file object or fstream object, then it will read it from the file rather than cin. And so what this will do is read each one of these numbers into this array one by one, just using something very similar to cin. So once we, presumably after that, you would read that file in and you'd use a bunch of functions to calculate the sum, average, and float of those arrays. Then the next function you had to have after that would be to write the information to the file. And so with the write function, here we're passing in all the things we want to write to the file. And instead of an ifstream object, we create an ofstream object for output. We open the file, and notice here we're using the name of the output file that we defined before. We're going to open that file, and then again we have a guard. It checks to see if we successfully opened the file. If we can't successfully open the file, then we output an error message and return false from this write function, just like we did from the read function. And then what we do is, just like we did with cout, again, you're used to seeing this as maybe a cout here. But instead of, we don't want to write to the screen, which would be what cout would be. Instead, we want to write to the file, which is this ofstream object. So we use the same stream operators, but instead of going to cout, we send it to the bell output, and this will actually write it to the file. And then notice that when you're writing to your file, you can also use your IO manip library to set precision, set floats, and format your output. And that will end up looking like this. So we can see everything we output ends up being displayed in the file, in phonebillsummary.txt. So that completes how we use ifstream and ofstream to get information from a file and then output it to another file. Thank you.